Good morning, everyone, and thank you for waiting. It has been a bit of delay getting in. My name's Arthur Lane, and I'm the Commodore of the CYCA. Welcome. Today we're going to go through a briefing, and first of all I'd like to introduce Gabrielle Woodhouse, who's from BOM. We'll also have Mark Jacobs, who's the Search and Rescue Officer from AMSA, and he'll have something, but he'll be talking online. Rear Commodore Lee Goddard, who's the Chairman of the Race Committee, and Tracy Matthews, who represents the Royal Yacht Club of Tasmania and is a past Commodore of that club. Without much more ado, and people are still coming in, but if you can go to the rear of the room, there's some space there. Gabriella, would you like to come through and maybe give your discussion on the weather? We're looking forward to that.
The weather is all important. Hopefully these slides are going to be up and running. Rightio, so today there's a few things that we're going to need to get through. Some of it should just be a refresher, but it's also just good to know what we're forecasting, where to access it, and then lastly, what kind of weather we're going to be seeing throughout the race. So looking at some of the aspects of marine safety on the water, with the forecast, there's obviously a few elements involved, and the main one obviously being wind. Now, as you're out on the water, you know that that wind will fluctuate from minute to minute, and what we'll see on the forecast is an average over about 10 minutes. So this gives you a sort of indication of roughly what kind of wind speeds you'll be seeing, but it does also mean that you'll be seeing some wind a little bit stronger, and typically we'll see gusts about 40% stronger than what is on the forecast. The other part to note with the forecast is that we can also see some pretty erratic winds with thunderstorms, and we can also have a pretty abrupt and sudden increase in the wind strengths when we see squalls come through. So that's one thing to pay attention to when you see that on the forecast. The other part is with the wind direction, we'll give that in relation to the 8 compass points. And the other part is in terms of wind strengths, we do have a number of marine wind warnings that will be issued when we're expecting or we have observed those strengths across the coastal waters, which I'll go through in a minute. Now, strong winds, when we're looking at winds exceeding 26 knots, and that moves into the gale territories when we see winds exceeding 34 knots. As we get stronger and stronger, we start to see the storm force and hurricane force winds, and these are typically associated with tropical cyclones or really intense east coast lows, so they're not all that common. But the one thing to note is that with the storm force winds, that is not related to thunderstorms, that's related to synoptically driven wind. With thunderstorms, if there is a risk of thunderstorms, they're going to be mentioned separately within the forecast and contained within the weather section. Obviously, with these sorts of winds, you'll see increasing wave heights, and you'll also see those wind gusts being particularly stronger still. Looking at the waves on the water, so we separate some of the energy out into what we call seas and swell. Now, the seas is the waves that are generated from the local weather system, so the current winds that we're seeing across the water. They tend to be a little bit more disorganised and a little bit more choppy, and the period of those waves is a little bit less. For the swell, that's going to be waves that are generated from distant weather systems, and they're going to be more organised and a longer period, so you'll see those sets come in. Now, when we combine these two different waves, and in fact, there's often multiple different swells, they will combine in different ways. So sometimes you might see some much lower waves, sometimes some much bigger waves. And so in order to combine these are presented as a significant wave height. And the significant wave height is a bit of a tricky one to sort of grasp, just because it's looking at the average of the highest third of waves. What this means is that quite often you'll see some of these waves combine in a way that they're going to be much higher than that significant wave height that's on the forecast. And that's just due to the way those waves are combining and the fact that the significant wave height is the average of that highest third of waves. So one to watch out for on the forecast, particularly when we see those winds increase, and that you could see those maximum wave heights almost roughly double those significant wave heights in some cases. The other thing to watch out for on the water is reference of some significant weather systems. So this can range from thunderstorms, where you know that you can get some really low visibility with heavy rain. You can also get really gusty winds and quite erratic wind directions associated with them. So that's one to watch out for. But along the east coast of Australia, that's where we often see lows develop, including east coast lows, and that's where we see strong to gale force winds develop. heavy rain, thunderstorms, so they're one to watch out for. The other part that we can often see is very strong cold fronts and troughs that move through, and with that you'll have a wind change, and often you'll see some strong winds. Bear with me one sec. The other thing to note when we see showers and storms along the water, sometimes we'll see water spouts that form with these showers and storms. They can have some, fairly strong, intense little rotations with the winds, and that is obviously a danger, and they're very, very difficult to forecast ahead of time. You'll sometimes see them, but not always. Last part is often we'll see some sea fog, particularly over parts of the Bass Strait, and that is potentially a feature during this race. Further north, there is obviously the tropical cyclones and monsoon that will affect you out on the water. So one to watch out for is going to be those winds, the low visibility, lightning, etc. From the Bureau, we often, when we do see significant weather systems come through, in addition to those marine wind warnings, we'll issue severe weather warnings and hazardous surf warnings. Now, the hazardous surf warning is when we're looking at particularly deceptively powerful swells that are going to be coming through, and that's really going to affect you if you're really close inshore and you're looking to cross some sandbars and things like that. The other part is with severe weather warnings. These can be issued for really abnormally high tides as well as damaging surf. So again, this can be quite dangerous when you're crossing sandbars and heading in towards land. So where and what are we able to find these forecasts? So across Australia really, we've got what we call the coastal waters forecasts, and this includes the local water forecasts. And these forecasts look at the conditions within 60 nautical miles of the land, and they're issued at least twice a day. When we have a current marine wind warning or an expected wind warning, then we'll see those forecasts be updated every 6 hours. And if we do see significant changes to that forecast, the forecast will be updated when we see that. So looking at this race in particular, there's quite a few coastal water zones that are in play. So obviously we've got the Sydney enclosed waters, then heading down the coast we've got Sydney, Illawarra, Batemans, Eden, then we've got East Gippsland, east of Flinders, Upper East, Lower East, South East, and then as you head in towards Hobart itself, Storm Bay and Darwin Estuary. So there's quite a few coastal zones and a lot of different information that are contained within those coastal waters forecasts. What it looks like is something like this, where it'll have a synoptic situation that describes what kind of features we're seeing on the mean sea level pressure chart, where they're going to be and how that system is going to evolve. Then, broken down day by day, it will contain information on the wind, the seas, the swell, and the weather. For parts of New South Wales and Victoria, if there is a hazardous surf warning, that caution statement will be included on these forecasts as well. For the coastal waters marine wind warning, this is in a separate product and it will just list the coastal zones. The information for when you're looking at strong winds or gale force winds, that's going to be contained within the coastal waters forecast rather than in the warning itself. Looking a little bit further offshore, there's also the high seas forecast. Now, this is a very similar but slightly different product in that you have an area that is quite a large area. So you can see on the map on the right-hand side there that the southeastern zone pretty much covers all the way from the southeast Queensland coast down through New South Wales, Victoria, Tasmania, and over to South Australia. So it covers a huge area, and what it's looking at is the forecast conditions over the next 24 hours. And when we have warnings current in these zones, then again, those forecasts are updated every 6 hours. So looking at an example of it, you can see it looks a little bit different, and it can be somewhat a little bit more challenging to read, but it's essentially going to have the same information. It's going to let you know if there's warnings that are current. It's going to tell you what the synoptic situation is, but it is going to plot it by lat and long and give you another placement further along in time. And underneath that, it'll give you the forecast, and that forecast will be in relation to those synoptic features, and it'll give you an indication of wind strength, wind direction, what kind of seas, and what kind of weather you'll be seeing. So same, but different, and it does cover a fairly large area. And in terms of the warnings, again, these are in a separate product, and what you can see is a similar sort of a thing where you'll see what kind of warning is it? Is it a gale wind warning? Is it a strong wind warning? Is it a storm force warning? and then it'll give you information in terms of the situation, the area that's affected by that warning, and then the forecast within that area. Lastly, you can also access a lot of the data through METI on the Bureau's website as well as on the Bureau's app. And this information is updated at least twice daily. When we see significant changes, that data is obviously updated then as well. So on here you can access winds, waves, temperatures, what kind of weather you'll be seeing as well. So quite useful to see in terms of a map view rather than a point location. So how do you actually access all of this data? So out on the water, there's a few ways to access the forecast information. And so that ranges from the satellite to HF and VHF radio, as well as there's an internet light page called Marine Light that will include information about the warnings and the forecast itself. For the HF radio, there's a few different channels. Some of them only operate during the day and some only operate at night. And what happens is every hour they'll repeat what warnings are current, but it's only every 4 hours that they'll repeat the forecast conditions for that area. So that's one to watch out for, and there's 2 channels that will broadcast throughout the day and the night, and they're in bold on the screen. The Marine Light webpage is a page that is basically devoid of any ads, and it's really low bandwidth so that it's easier to use out on the water. It contains all of the same information, so you can access some downloadable maps, you can access warnings, forecasts, so it's a really useful web page to make use of to see the latest on the Bureau's forecasts. So getting to the interesting part of the presentation, which I think you're all waiting for, is looking at the weather briefing for the race ahead. So at the moment, we're looking at predominantly sort of north-northeasterly winds for Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday, but we are going to be seeing those winds increase in strength, and by Wednesday, particularly across Tasmania and parts of the Bass Strait, we could be seeing strong to almost gale force winds. And then we'll be seeing a cold front move through during Wednesday. That is going to bring a west to southwesterly change, and by Wednesday night or Thursday morning, we'll see those winds turn more southerly across Tasmania and the Bass Strait. The other thing to note is that on Tuesday, we are looking at low cloud, drizzle and maybe misty conditions across the Bass Strait, and also along the east coast of Tasmania. We could see a little bit of that along the far southern coast of New South Wales, but it's a little bit less likely than a little bit further south. So it's fairly likely that we'll be seeing a number of warnings being issued for this race, particularly strong wind warnings, potential for some gale wind warnings. So if we have a look at the race start conditions and in the morning indeed, across Sydney we're looking at a little bit of low cloud in the morning, but that should lift fairly quickly and we should be seeing some pretty sunny skies by race start, and we'll see those northeasterly winds pick up a little bit. So on the harbour, looking about 10 to 15 knots. Once you get out of the heads, and particularly once we move a little bit further south, we could be seeing up to 20 knots of wind, but generally sunny skies. By Monday afternoon, we'll still be seeing those northeasterly winds. It'll be somewhere around 10 to 20 knots. At the moment, it seems like some of that strength will be slightly offshore. Inshore might be a fraction less, but nonetheless, it's still going to be northeasterly, and we'll have a fairly low east-southeasterly swell. By Tuesday morning, what we'll see is those winds increase a little bit, and we'll start to see those seas increasing as well. From later on Tuesday, we could be seeing the potential for some strong wind warnings, and again, we could be seeing that sort of low cloud and drizzly or misty weather across parts of the Bass Strait. What you can see here by Tuesday night is those winds have really started to pick up, and we're looking at those seas increasing as a result. For those that might be headed towards Hobart, once you round Tasman Island, you'll be seeing that southwesterly swell pick up as well. Otherwise, we're seeing that east-northeasterly swell, and maybe a southerly swell of about 1 metre hanging around. But for the most part, we're looking at fresh to strong winds from the northeast on Tuesday. By Wednesday morning, what you can see is that approaching cold front means that we'll see those winds increase further. And you can see that we could see some local gales somewhere off the Tasmanian coast, and indeed it's going to be pretty windy across Tasmania itself. So whilst for the most part we're looking at northerly winds, inshore they could be tending more northwesterly, and particularly along the Derwent it could be more northwesterly. Strong winds are going to be quite likely, and we will be seeing those, fairly large seas developing as we see those winds increase through the morning. The other part that we'll note is as that cold front approaches, we'll be seeing that high cloud increase, and from late morning or the middle part of the day, you could see a light shower or two come through as well. There is a very, very slight risk that we could see some lightning or a thunderstorm as this front moves through during Wednesday. By Wednesday afternoon, what you can see here is that northeasterly wind still running down the New South Wales coast and a fair amount of the Tasmanian coast, but we are starting to see that southwesterly change push across Tasmania and parts of the Bass Strait. So with that, we will start to see the winds shift and the seas pick up and also become a little bit more confused. So we still will be seeing a shower or two and the risk of a thunderstorm, but we are likely to see strong wind warnings and may see some local gales still on Wednesday afternoon. Now this system is going to keep progressing east on Wednesday evening. So at this stage it could be somewhere around Gaybo Island by Wednesday night, and we'll see those sort of west-southwesterly winds pushing across Bass Strait and Tasmania, but remaining northeasterly along the New South Wales coast. So with that, the wind strength looks as though it will start to weaken overnight on Wednesday, but it's not really until Thursday morning that we'll see the winds ease a little bit more. So with that, the seas that were generated from the really strong northerlies, they'll start to transition to swell. So you start to see a bit of a northeasterly swell, but later on you'll see a southwesterly swell develop. So it becomes quite confusing, particularly across the eastern Bass Strait from later Wednesday. And what you can see here is by Thursday morning, along the Tasmanian coast, the winds tend more southerly and they're much lighter. Still looking as though we could see a strong wind warning during the morning of Thursday, but the change itself will start to move up the New South Wales coast during Thursday. And with that, we'll see the seas starting to decrease, but we will see a number of different swells from a few different directions. So we'll still have a southwesterly to the south of Tasman Island, and we could have a west to southwesterly moving through parts of the Bass Strait, as well as the southerly starting to swing around into the eastern parts of the Bass Strait. So a little bit confusing and not the greatest in that regard. By Thursday morning, like in the late morning that is, you can see that that wind strength really has dropped off and that we are turning more southerly, and as that change pushes further north, we'll start to tend a little bit more southeasterly over the Bass Strait. So it's going to be a challenging period through Wednesday and Thursday with those wind changes, as well as that swell. By the evening on Thursday, that cold front will have moved much further east and we'll start to have a ridge developing. So we'll see winds turning more southeasterly through the evening and into Friday, but it is still going to remain fresh across the Bass Strait and up the New South Wales coast. Along the Tasmanian coast, it's going to be a little bit lighter and probably around 10 knots, maybe getting up to 15 knots at this stage. So a little bit of a challenge, and we could still see a shower or two up across parts of the Bass Strait and New South Wales. A little bit less likely to see those showers across Tasmania. Looking at the long-range forecast for Friday, what I've got up on screen is just a comparison of some mean sea level pressure analyses from a number of different models, some thickness lines, and a little bit of rainfall on the forecast. And what I want to sort of draw your attention to is the fact that most of these models are developing some kind of low pressure system over the northern Tasman Sea during Friday, and potentially extending a trough down across the Tasman Sea towards Tasmania. And so this is going to be a feature for the second half of the race. So on the whole, we are looking at a ridge of high pressure developing across Tasmania and winds turning a little bit more east-northeasterly through Friday and Saturday. So that's going to be one to watch out for, because as we move into Saturday, again, you can see that low moves a little bit further south, probably see that ridge across Tasmania, but also the chance we could just sort of see a slight little wind change and or a shower as that high develops across Tasmania on the Saturday. It is still pretty much a week out, so a lot can change between now and then on the forecast, so it's going to be one to pay close attention to, particularly if you're going to head home nice and early. So on Saturday, we're going to see those east-northeasterly winds Maybe see a little bit of southeasterly over parts of the strait, but not too much in it at this stage. And looking at Sunday, it's a very similar sort of a story, with again those sort of east-northeasterly winds, slightly fresher through the strait. Now, depending on when you do make it to Hobart, you've got a variation in what you can expect weather-wise. So with that cold front coming through, it's going to be warm and windy on Wednesday, and we'll probably see fairly cloudy conditions and a shower or two. But behind that change, it's going to be much cooler. So as you can see here on Thursday, maximum of just 20 degrees on Thursday compared to the 32 on Wednesday, and it'll still remain relatively cloudy. In terms of those overnight temperatures, it is going to remain pretty warm through the first half of the race. And once you see that cold front move through, instead of the overnight temperatures hovering around, basically 15 to 18 degrees, they'll drop down a few degrees. So it will be cooler overnight in particular from Thursday. Now, taking a quick look at the currents and the sea surface temperatures down the east coast, what we can see is we've got two little eddies that are basically offshore from Eden and the Eastern Bass Strait there. And what we'll see is not much in the way of a East Australia current, but it does weaken a little, the eddy near Eden does increase and strengthen a little bit during Wednesday. And in terms of those sea surface temperatures, you can see that it is, warmish, but currently the sea surface temperatures are still about a degree below the December average along the New South Wales coast, and hovering around 19 to 20 degrees. But as you head further south, we're looking more around the 15, 16 degree mark. Last but not least, looking at the tides, we are seeing some rather high tides over the next couple of mornings, in particular during that morning high tide, and that will start to decrease from effectively Boxing Day. But at race start, we are looking at the tide being an outgoing tide. So just to summarise, we're looking at predominantly north-northeasterly winds through the first half of the race, but we are going to be seeing them increase, and it's likely that we'll see strong wind warnings, and there's the potential for gale force warnings, particularly along the Tasmanian coast during Wednesday. Then we're going to see a cold front move through, and that's where we'll see winds turn more southwesterly and then southerly come Thursday. After that, we're looking at generally sort of southeast to northeasterly winds as that ridge of high pressure develops. One thing to note is that it does seem as though we'll have some low visibility with low cloud, drizzle and mist being a possibility across the Bass Strait and along the Tasmanian coast in particular on Tuesday. And we do see the risk of a thunderstorm on Wednesday as well. So with that, I might say thank you, and we'll open up to questions or pass it along.
Are there any questions of Gabriella? You got it lightly. Thank you so much. That's really very interesting. I mean, the start's going to be great, but then we move into a whole different world. Good luck, guys. Now we're going to have Mark Jacobs, who is the Search and Rescue Officer at AMSA. He's going to be online, I hope, and he'll be giving you what AMSA needs to talk about. Mark, you there? Okay.
Yeah, thanks very much, Arthur. Unfortunately, the host is disabled by sharing of screen. On this, we've had to restart a Zoom meeting here. So I'm not sure whether, Mitch, you're able to share my screen or enable that, please. Are you there, Mitch? Okay, that's better. Thanks, Mitch. And just checking that now you've got me on audio and you've got my sharing of screen. All right. In the absence of any response there, I'll commence my briefing. I'll just introduce myself. I'm Mark Jacobs, Senior Search and Rescue Officer from JRCC Australia, in Canberra. Hopefully the race this year goes well for everyone, and that you actually don't necessarily need our assistance. But if you do, I'm just going to go through a couple of things here. I'm just going to start talking about EPIRBs. So an EPIRB, if you need to use your EPIRB during the race for any particular reason, an emergency situation, attach to the person, life raft or vessel if the vessel's not sinking. If you're in the life raft and it's rough, keep the EPIRB inside but in a vertical position. And then be aware of what type of EPIRB you have, whether it's a manual activation or a water activated EPIRB. The difference between an EPIRB and a PLB is the fact that a PLB is not designed to float. So if you need to activate your PLB in an emergency situation, you'll need to attach it to the upper portion of your body above the water, ensure the aerial is vertical, and ensure the lanyard is attached to yourself so it does not become separated from yourself. What will happen if you activate an EPIRB or PLB? What you will see, or should see, when it's activated correctly, is the beacon will emit an audible tone, a strobe light, or an LED light, which will be flashing. Once activated, a distress message is received by the satellite and comes into our centre here in the JRCC. We'll check the details of the EPIRB to ensure who it's registered with, who it's registered to, and then liaise with police and race officials. And we will then coordinate a rescue and response. So that brings me on to the important part with beacon activations is, hey, historically, we have had false activations, which are either by pushing the button while it's in your PFD attached to you. If you're aware that you have inadvertently activated your PLB or EPIRB, if you can make communications with race officials, just put your hand up and just, we've had an inadvertent activation, and that way we will be advised, we will know that that particular beacon has been inadvertently activated, and then we can get you to possibly shield it from the satellite and deactivate it. So in that case, that brings me on to also, if you can ensure that you're able to communicate and listen to communications via radio and also your satellite phones, so that we can check in the first instance whether this is an emergency situation or whether it is an inadvertent alert. These are some of the SAR assets, search and rescue assets, that you hopefully won't see during a race. We've got the Challenger aircraft in the top left-hand corner, and we've got helicopters dotted down the coast, ready to respond for emergency situations. So this brings me on to a helicopter transfer situation. If something has happened to your crew, yourselves, and your vessel, listen to VHF, turn the volume up, follow all the directions from the helicopter. Okay, they are going to be making a comprehensive risk assessment on site of how they will handle any situation while they're above yourself or your craft. Stow all your loose equipment, remove and frap and secure all sails. Be prepared for extremely strong winds, and I know the Bureau of Met has just been on, and you're going to get some decent winds, but the winds downdraft from the helicopter is going to produce a lot of noise and a lot of spray. If possible, start the engine and steer into the weather. If the engine's inoperable, if you can stream a sea anchor drogue from the bow to put you bow into the wind, will assist helicopter operations, but take all advice from the actual asset above you. Turn your radar on standby and don't use HF communications at the time. Further to that, obviously being sailing vessels, it's hard, a very difficult situation to, if it's a winching operation due to rigging. So be prepared to be able to launch a life raft, and maybe it's in times of winching operations, it's easier for a helicopter to winch a person out of a life raft that has been deployed from the deck of a sailing vessel. But again, I can't stress enough that just take advice from the helicopter that's on site. Medical assistance plan. In the first instance, contact race committee for initial advice and assessment. If there's any medical situation on board your vessel. In cases of a serious injury or illness, they'll contact JRCC Australia here. And if the patient requires a medevac or we need to drop medical stores, we can do so, assist in doing so and set that up. Of course, if it's a serious injury, serious illness, you may also contact us directly here or 000 directly. And brings me on to the return trip. Hopefully we have a very uneventful race this year. But once the race is complete, that's great. But we're also very interested in your safety on your return voyage. Okay, it's not just the race that we hope is really good. We hope that the return voyage to wherever you've come from is also safe and uneventful. So if possible, please update your EPIRB and contact details for the return home. And I know a lot of times it's skeleton crew on the return home, and we have had incidents on the return home. So if we can ensure that everyone gets home safely, gets down there safely, and also returns. So yeah, I'd like to thank you very much, and happy racing.
Thank you very much, Mark. That was very inclusive. Thank you. Next, I'd like to introduce Rear Commodore Lee Goddard, who is the chairman of the race committee, to go through the sailing instructions. Lee.
Thanks, Gabriel. Thanks, Mark. And good morning, everybody. I'm Lee Goddard. I'm the chair of the Rolex Sydney and Hobart Yacht Race Committee. I'm also the on-water race director, working closely, of course, with the CEO, Justine Kirkjian, and also the CYCA sailing manager, Tara Blank-Ramos, and of course our Royal Yacht Club of Tasmania finishing line team led by Tracy Matthews. Welcome to this, what is the compulsory briefing, as is the final weather briefing at 8 a.m. This coming Monday, the 26th, ahead of the race start at 1 p.m. I acknowledge our Commodore, Arthur, obviously all the team here at the CYCA, in particular the volunteers as well as the professional staff, the Royal Yacht Club of Tasmania, Rolex, of course our sponsor, the Bureau of Meteorology, if you've just heard, AMSA, Maritime New South Wales, the New South Wales Police and Tasmanian Police Marine units, which we work very closely with, Marine Rescue, the international jury, the media, of course, and most importantly, the competitors, the elite athletes that you are, as you prepare for Monday's great race. The committee that I lead are all volunteers, and our role is simple, is to ensure the safest, the fairest, and the fastest race possible. And that's certainly the intent, and we're on track to achieve that for this Monday. We have a broad range of backgrounds and experience, including in the race, and we are risk aware, not risk adverse. Our starting point is while we will always be fair and we'll act with discretion when required, we are black and white when it comes in terms of expectations and the race discipline to make sure that the race is managed correctly, and that those who participate do so in accordance with the very clear directions. The sailing instructions, as you would all be aware, were issued on Monday, 7 days out from the race, which is standard. And of course, you'll be very aware of the notice to race and of course the other regulations as is required for the Rolex Sydney Hobart Yacht Race. And I thank all owners and participants for your great cooperation so far in 2022, in particular your regulatory compliance. And I know it can be quite daunting and can be overwhelming and can be frustrating at times as well, but it really is very, very important. And I'm going to mention a few times, I want to just highlight up front the discipline and the importance of the SCED, especially from a safety and a coordination perspective throughout the race. We have contingency plans, and we've just seen the weather, and we've just heard AMSA speak, for the full range of situations and emergencies. And of course, we have to assume the worst conditions. That said, you've heard it, the first 2 days are going to be fast. After that, we've got to assume that conditions can get very bad very quickly. We hope they don't, but we need to make sure that we are all prepared accordingly. We've learned from the precedents, we've learned from previous races, and we've adapted to changing regulations and to changing technologies as well, and changing types of entries and changing types of experiences as well. As you know, I'll go through just some of the highlights of the sailing instructions as described by the notice of race. And of course, at the moment, we have one amendment to that. Mind you, you must have the correct but minimum requirements for safety numbers at all times. Any crew change must be advised and acknowledged by the sailing office. Please note the advice on the potential HADs to navigation across the route. Reporting at the start. We have a large fleet, 109 starters in 4 clear promulgated starting lines. So please give room as you approach the committee vessel, and of course, who will be on VHF 72, and make sure proper considerations when manoeuvring. And from the Maritime New South Wales, I remind you that when you're in the exclusion zone, stay there. That's exactly why it's been set up. The Principal Race Officer, the PRO, will advise for each line clear or may individually recall, and this will be advised by VHF. There will be no general recall following the race start on Monday. This is important. If you do decide to discontinue racing for a set period, advising race control, you offload crew and then restart, you must still have the minimum number of crew on board with the correct experience and qualifications. That rule still applies after you've offloaded. Mind you, the declarations, they must be within 6 hours of finishing, and please ensure that you receive a receipt from the race committee and race control. Radio instructions. Well, first of all, I'd like to acknowledge John Winning, because this year it's the 17th time that the JBW has been made available, which is a fantastic reflection on his support to this great race. And JBW will be positioned appropriately, generally halfway through the fleet. But please note that Young Endeavour, the tool ship, is not participating in this year's race. JBW may call on any yacht with a good radio signal at either end of the fleet to relay positions. And that's why it's called the radio relay vessel. So please support accordingly. SCEDs. Let's try it to say, charge your batteries and tune prior. And primary, of course, is 4483 as per the sailing instructions, with 6156 simplex as a backup. Note it's not duplex. JPW will conduct a test broadcast 2 minutes prior to the SCED and checking with Hobart Race Control. JPW will then commence the SCED with a weather warning, followed by the fleet position reports at 0635 and at 1835 daily, and that means that you must accurately chart your position at 0630 and 1830 daily. If you have a problem with HF, make every effort by VHF through another vessel, or call JBW or Hobart Race Control, or if you really need to, call me on my mobile. Your tracker. Your tracker is to track you, but the SCED confirms that you are okay. Please do not conflate the two. Now, mind you, the discipline of the SCED. You'll not need to touch the trackers at all unless you need to activate the beacon. JBW will be available for pre-race communication checks from 11:30 to 12:30 this Monday the 26th on HF Primary, as I said, 4483. You must at all times keep a proper listening watch, by all means practical, on VHF channel 16, and you are obligated to report wind strengths and wave heights when wind strength exceeds 40 knots. And you've seen the weather forecast, and we'll need to monitor that closely together. Satellite communications. These checks will be conducted daily at 13:35 from next Tuesday the 27th. A selection of the boats in the fleet will be called at random, and you are required to answer. The Green Cape call ahead of Bass Strait at 37:15 south, that call is mandatory. You can call and receive acknowledgement from JBW or Hobart Race Control. As I said, it is mandatory, and you must receive positive confirmation and clearance to proceed. This must occur, and I repeat, you must receive clearance to receive as you enter Bass Strait and go past the Green Cape call. If you do retire, please continue to participate in the skeds and advise us when you are safely in port. And of course, our team that we have in Eden will be able to assist if you do proceed there. The yellow brick is a critical safety device, so please ensure a full understanding of it. As mentioned by AMSA, we have medical professionals on call. Please ensure that you have fully considered your plans on your boat with your team for dealing with and reporting medical emergencies. At the start of the race, the media will be close to the racing action, as you'd expect, and this will be in a non-interference basis, and there will be movements from between some boats, people jumping on and off. Man overboard, you heard from AMSA, from Mark there. You as skippers and as teams would have practiced this, I'd expect, often in the last few weeks. Good VHF, communicate early and communicate externally early. Early broadcasts as well as your life-saving devices, and deal with your circumstances, and we will be ready to assist and help. Please check your personal flotation devices and check them again. And we do recommend seasickness tablets in your grab bags. Note the recent advice regarding iPhones as well at sea, that when they are jolting, some of them are actually alerting police that you've actually been in a crash. So actually there's been a lot of those happen in the last couple of weeks for yachts. So it's just a new phenomenon that we now need to deal with. So just be aware of that especially as you leave Sydney Harbour. We mentioned before about inadvertent triggering of EPIRBs and PLBs. I'm not going to labour on this. It happened 12 times in last year's race. There's a process to be followed. The simple process is if you know it's occurred, then you need to tell race control and or AMSA as soon as practical, or we will contact you if once AMSA contacts race control. The reality is, if within 30 minutes we have not confirmed that it's inadvertent, we have to assume it's real. With AMSA, we will go into the full process, including potentially deploying assets, very expensive assets, if it's actually not a real incident. And you could see the range of aircraft and fixed-wing and rotary wing aircraft up and down the coast ready to support this race. And said, we've seen it before, they will go at the 30-minute mark. Sea life, I think a number of you, and I've been out this week as well, I've seen the whales, dolphins, and we've seen some big sunfish out there this year as well. So be ready for that. And notice the sailing instruction on drones and comply. And of course, maintain a good lookout at all times. Of course, good lookout isn't just looking, it's actually by listening as well, and by all means possible. And as mentioned by AMSA then, and you've given a heads up by BOM about the potential weather conditions, consider your delivery home plan and make sure you inform your next of kin, whoever's doing it, of what your delivery plan. We prefer not to be the go-between. It should be you telling them exactly what your intentions are when you are going home. And again, I remind you that HF for this race in 2022 is still our primary means of communication. And watch out for general notices, the paperwork, the spots checks, the sat phone checks, etc. as well. It would be remiss of me before I wrap up just to go through the yachts that still need to contact the sailing office and pick up paperwork. Pac-Man, Sunrise, Fruit Salad, Yeah Baby, and Bowline, you all need to go to the racing office. And then there's some yachts that still need to finalise spot checks, and that includes demonstrating bilge pumps. It includes Coopers, Blink, South Brittany, Sunfast Racing, White Noise, Quantock, Esprit, Hutchie's Yeah Baby, Jocasta, Pac-Man, Navy One, and White Bay 60. So those yachts have still got to complete those final safety spot checks today. So in summary, the great race is on. It's going to be safe, it's going to be fair, and clearly by the weather forecast, it is going to be fast, and we are committed to supporting you, the competitors. Thank you very much.
Wow. Thank you so much, Rear Admiral Goddard. That was pretty comprehensive and very, very instructive. Listen to what he said. It's important. Next, we have Tracy Matthews from our finishing partner, the Royal Yacht Club of Tasmania, to let you know what happens when you get down to Hobart. Thank you.
Good morning. The Royal Yacht Club of Tasmania is looking forward to seeing you all back in the River Derwent sometime next week. A lot of the things I'm going to cover today will be a refresher for most of you, but for those of you who have not been to Hobart before, there's a few things to note. Details of the finishing line and other finishing notes are in the sailing instructions at clause 17. The finish line is off Castray Esplanade in Battery Point, and this is what it looks like. Same as last year. Positioned between the white Empress Towers on the left and the cream CSIRO building on the right. The outer end of the line will be marked with a yellow buoy and will have a flashing light at night. There's also an inner distance mark that must be left to port. If you're finishing at night, please illuminate your sail number on the port side so the finish box can confirm your identity. Once you're through the finish line, contact the finish box as per the sailing instructions, drop sails and stand by for the escort vessel. This will be one of the RYCT or DSS patrol boats. If there's several yachts finishing together, please be patient. A patrol boat will get to you as soon as possible. Observe all the directions from the skipper of the patrol boat and please do not enter Kings Pier Marina until you've been instructed to do so. During the operating hours of the Taste of Summer Festival, you'll enter the dock via a short detour past Princess Wharf, where you'll receive a very enthusiastic welcome from those enjoying the festival on the shore. It should be noted that this year we're sharing the waterfront and the berthing facilities with the 50th Melbourne to Hobart fleet, as well as the Launceston to Hobart fleet, so it will be a tight fit for all. The Rolex Sydney to Hobart fleet will be berthed as per usual within the Kings Pier Marina and also this year in Constitution Dock, taking account of your yacht length and draft and the suitable berths available. You've been allocated a berth and will be directed to that berth by the patrol boat. You must use your assigned berth. Most yachts berthed in Kings Pier Marina will be berthed alongside the floating pontoons. There'll be a few yachts berthed alongside the Elizabeth Street Pier, and these may be doubled up. Any yacht to be berthed alongside a wharf will be issued with fender boards, however, you will require your own fenders. All yachts are required to have at least 2 fenders available and accessible when berthing. Yachts with a draft of 2.4 metres or less should expect to be berthed in Constitution Dock, and you will require at least 4 fenders. Please do not send your fenders down with your baggage. They must be accessible on your arrival. Those yachts in Constitution Dock with lengths of between 9 and 11 metres will be berthed Mediterranean style onto a floating pontoon, and you may be required to deploy an anchor. You'll need to have your anchor with you on board and it should be accessed prior to entering the dock. All other yachts berthed in Constitution Dock will be alongside and may be doubled up. Again, fender boards will be provided for alongside berthing. The patrol boat will give you all the instructions you need as you're getting your sails down and getting ready to go into Kings Pier Marina. Entering Constitution Dock requires the bridge to be opened by Tasports. To facilitate this may require yachts to be staged within Kings Pier Marina for a short period of time before the bridge can be opened. Your cooperation will be required. Our volunteers will endeavour to get you berthed as soon as possible. Please follow the instructions from the patrol boat. As per usual, the Race Liaison Centre will be in the Rolex Village, which is the big X there on the screen, and our volunteers will be there to help you with any queries, questions and directions. Whether you're in Condoc or Kings Pier, once you're safely berthed, you'll be welcomed by our volunteers. In exchange for your tracker, the volunteers will deliver some well-earned refreshments. For the two-handed cruise this year, there will be an opportunity for some additional volunteer assistance if required. Between 12 noon and 6 p.m. on the 30th and the 31st of December. If you would like some extra help packing or carting, please see the Liaison Centre on your arrival. You'll also receive a quarantine bag when you arrive. It's a requirement of Biosecurity Tasmania that every yacht disposes quarantine items appropriately. Use the quarantine bag provided to dispose of all fish and fish products, meat and meat products, fruit and vegetables, eggs and seed. If you have any doubt, chuck it out. Quarantine bins will be around the village, including in the waste compound. Baggage, same as last year. Same collection point. Executive Building, underground car park in Despard Street. Easy to find and a short walk from the village. It's in the street that runs behind PJ's Ship Chandlery and the Customs House Hotel, and I'm sure everyone knows where that is. There will be signage and phone numbers for assistance at the location. This is the 30th year that the Glenorchy Rotary Club will again be supporting the race and staffing the baggage collection area. They'll be open for business 24 hours daily after the first yacht finishes and up to 24 hours after the last yacht arrives, except on New Year's Eve. They'll be closed from 8 p.m. on New Year's Eve until 7 a.m. New Year's Day. Please label each separate bag you put on the truck with your name and contact details. And also note that in the event of retirement from the race, you are responsible for the collection and return transport of your bags from Hobart. Although COVID requirements are more relaxed this year, much more relaxed, there is still a strong occurrence of the virus in the community. If at any time you need to access a testing clinic, if any of your crew are feeling unwell or displaying symptoms, the nearest testing clinic is in the same location as last year, behind 16A Evans Street, Mac Point. Bookings are no longer required, but check the latest opening hours and the additional COVID information online. Some final points: all power cords used in the marina must be tagged and tested, and you must run them safely on the walkways. If you need to get a cord tested, see the Liaison Centre and they can help you with that. The official prize giving is again in the Federation Concert Hall at the Hotel Grand Chancellor, 3 p.m. on New Year's Eve. All yachts must vacate the marina by 10 a.m. on the 3rd of January or have made other arrangements with Tasports. Any problems at all, please see our friendly volunteers at the Race Liaison Centre. I also encourage everyone to come down to Murrayville Esplanade to visit us at the Royal Yacht Club of Tasmania. It's only a short distance from the dock, and it's also where the committee room is, the radio room and the protest room during the race. The club will be open normal hours, and it's a great place to enjoy a change of scenery, enjoy the bar, outdoor deck and dining. Please call us at the club if there's anything we can help you with or services you need. Finally, I wish you all a safe trip to Hobart, a very Merry Christmas, have a great race, stay safe, and I look forward to seeing you on arrival next week. Cheers.
Thank you, Stacey. That was very clear. Thank you so much. We still have some more instructions. I know it's been a morning of instructions, very clear instructions, but this meeting is a compulsory one, so if you haven't signed in, please sign in. And also, if you need the division lists, if you haven't got them yet, they're on the side here, as well as your allocation for the start line. Good luck, everyone, and we'll see you down in Hobart. Thank you.